So you're all welcome to the February meeting of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee. I'm going to pass over to John for the notice summons the meeting and the attendance.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. To all members of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the committee, which will be a hybrid meeting conducted remotely via WebEx and physically in the Council Chamber in the Guildhall today, Tuesday the 6th of February at 4 o'clock. Alderman Cook.
Here.
Alderman Hussey. Alderman Wilkinson. Councillor Boggs.
Shaw John.
Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Sandra Duffy.
And Shaw, apologies.
Thank you. Alderman Wilkinson is online. Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Harkin. Councillor Heaney.
Here.
Councillor Jackson. Councillor McGinley.
Sure.
Councillor Mooney. Councillor O'Farrell.
And sure, Lena John.
And Councillor Tierney. Thank you, members.
Thank you, John. Item 3 is our broadcasting statement. I would like to remind everyone present at this meeting in the Guildhall or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the Council's privacy notice may be found on the Council's website. Item 4 is declarations of members' interests. If anybody has anything to declare, you can do it now or at any point throughout the meeting and it'll be recorded. So moving forward, item 5 is our deputation, and today we are welcoming Christopher Mills from the Department for Communities, Housing Strategy and Coordination Branch, and Heloise Brown, who's the Director for the DFC Social Housing Policy and Oversight Division in relation to housing need following the committee reference GSB 121/23. Presentation will be on screens also in your pack, and our guests are joining us online. So what we'll do is we'll pass over to yourselves for the presentation and then we'll open it to the floor for members. So yous are welcome, Christopher and Heloise. So I'll pass over to yous now.
That's great. Thank you very much, Chair. Hope everybody can hear me okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Yes, thanks, Chair, for the invite, and thanks to the committee for inviting myself and Heloise to come and speak to you today. I'm going to provide a very quick overview and update of the work that's gone on the draft housing supply strategy and what its aims and goals have been since its inception. And then I'll be passing over to my colleague Heloise, who'll be joining to give you a bit of an overview on the new build social housing development programme. So really this is, in terms of the strategy, I just want to give you an overview on some of the fundamentals and the timeline and some of the issues that have been raised in the strategy since then. Go to the next slide, please. So this is a very simple overview of the timeline that we've been through in the delivery of this strategy. Going back way back to 2020, when the Minister at that time had announced a housing programme to the Assembly, in terms of why we needed a strategy, both New Decade, New Approach and the draft programme for government at that time recognised the importance of housing and achieving positive and social economic outcomes. And so it was felt a strategy was required to look at this. By July 2021, we had completed a call for evidence consultation, which really allowed an early opportunity for people to shape the strategy and to give their early input, advice and challenging or supplementing the evidence we had to developing the strategy. I know that Derry City and Strabane Council provided some input to that, so we thank you for your ongoing engagement with that. By December 2021 then, we had launched the draft strategy and an associated EQIA for public consultation, which concluded in February of 2022. By March 2022 then, we had worked towards drafting a final strategy with the aim to get approved and finalised. Obviously by that point, with the cessation of the executive, it wasn't possible to progress that further. Clearly, even in the last week, things have changed since then. We have an executive and the Minister's returned, and it would be our intention that the draft strategy would be put forward to the new Minister for consideration as soon as possible, notwithstanding conversations are still to be had with ministers about priorities. But we do hope that with recent developments, that some progress will be made to working towards the final agreed strategy. And then I'll talk shortly about some of the ongoing action planning that we've been able to do since then. If I can go to the next slide, please. So this is a very quick overview of the key fundamentals to the strategy. The vision of the strategy being that everybody has access to a good quality, affordable and sustainable home appropriate for their needs and located within a thriving and inclusive community. And that then is supported and underpinned by 5 main objectives. It took a lot of time to get that vision right. There was a lot of consultation on that, and we think that's a very representative vision of the work and the consultation that we've done on the strategy. And obviously being more about not just numbers for housing, but also meeting citizens' needs and creating places where people want to live. Strategy ultimately then provides a 15-year framework for delivery of the policies and actions that we think we need to build and supply here. But the focus of those 5 objectives then, the first one, increasing housing supply and affordable options, which includes improving understanding and estimation of our requirements and our housing needs, and essentially as well developing a better understanding of our current stock. Prioritising housing solutions for the most vulnerable. We know that poor and lack of housing is a major contributor to inequality and insecurity in society, and prevention of homelessness and reducing stress. Housing stress is key to tackling that. Improving housing quality then, with an aim for houses in all tenures to be expect the same kind of high standards no matter which tenure that you live in. Creating thriving and inclusive places, about helping people to contribute to design and accessing the housing options and the places and the communities in which they want to live, and then reducing carbon emissions and supporting a just transition to carbon neutrality. That's really a recognition of the key role that new housing and retrofitting of existing homes will play in achieving our climate change commitments. Go to the next slide, please. Some of you may have seen this before. This is a real fundamental to the work of the strategy. This was the recognition then to take a whole system approach. And very simply put, that whole system approach is really a recognition that there isn't one single overarching challenge affecting housing supply here. There isn't one thing you can put your finger on and say, if we fix that, we fix our supply. There are a lot of interdependent and interconnected issues that really need to be addressed together if we're going to, improve and meet our supply challenges here and provide the right sort of types of homes and the volumes that we need. On the left of that diagram, you have some of the demand factors, such as demographics, changing demographics, an aging population, economic factors, particularly within the last year, with interest rates and the cost of living. There's all kinds of demand impacts on housing through that. Social aspect, the environmental and climate action aspect, which has grown massively in the last couple of years, and then likes of technology and policy legislation. And then on the right-hand side of that, you can see some of those main levers for addressing supply. Again, I know that many of these will be sort of things that the council themselves will be familiar with in terms of infrastructure planning, the availability of land and property itself, access to finance and the right types of finance, and then innovation, and of course the skills that we need to deliver the houses that we need. I suppose it's important to clarify at this point that the strategy was an all tenure strategy. It wasn't just focused on one tenure. The idea that all of these issues impact, no matter whether it's private, social, affordable homes, these all have an impact. These kind of levers have an impact on all of those tenures. And so the strategy really aims to address that across all tenures. Next slide, please. We had 16 long-term policy commitments in the strategy. I'm obviously not going to go through all 16 of those, but just to give you a flavour of some of the main policy commitments that were drafted within the draft strategy that went for consultation. Having the right policy and legislation to deliver the housing we need, enhancing our open data platforms, and that's really about being able to share and access the right data, the organisations, agencies and those involved in the sector to be able to get access to the data they need to deliver. Supporting upskilling and reskilling, particularly with the types of houses that we're going to need in the future, how they're built, the skills we have to deliver those, not just having the skills to deliver, but also being able to retain those skills and apply them where we can in the country. Updating existing policies and developing new policies to ensure housing standards support that higher quality that we were aspiring to in that third objective of the strategy, and then protecting and optimising our existing housing supply. And that's really looking at retrofit, adaptive reuse of existing buildings, and then climate resilience generally. So a lot of these transformations are very complex in nature and will take time. And the intention would be that should there be any final agreed strategy, that the action planning and implementation process will make an effort to then sequence the key actions to ultimately deliver on those commitments and how we achieve the overall vision and objectives. Next slide, please. So again, I've kind of touched on these already with some of the levers earlier on, but these were, I mean, if you were to summarise what some of the key issues, the big strategic issues were in terms of being able to improve our supply, certainly land availability, access to land and the zoning of land. And I know that was something that in the call for evidence stage that the council mentioned directly was of significance in their area. Water and sewage infrastructure, I mean, infrastructure generally will always have a significant impact. And I know in rural areas, for example, broadband infrastructure was raised as a particularly important area, but water and sewage infrastructure certainly is probably one of the most significant barriers we have to delivering our housing supply, with considerable investment needed in terms of upgrading new supply. Skills to deliver, as I've already touched on, and the climate change and decarbonisation piece, which is an area that even at the start of developing the draft wasn't massively significant, but since then has grown considerably and is now a significant consideration in its own right. And I know there's work now ongoing in terms of a specific residential climate action plan, which is being taken forward as well. So next slide, please. So in terms of an overall update on where we are then, obviously since the slides have been sent through to yourselves, we have a new executive and ministers in place now. And so the publication in 2022 was delayed then without an executive, but we do hope that recent developments will allow us for progress to be made in working towards the final strategy. The cross-cutting nature of issues means that we always saw it really as really necessary to be an executive strategy to deliver on the issues that we have in terms of supply. It really, a lot of the issues cut across so many departments that, the intention for an executive strategy was always there from the outset. And that's where I think we'd be working towards. We do have that buy-in from a high level across departments and sector, and we've always intended to try and align with other strategies, such as the skills strategy, green growth, energy strategies and homelessness strategies, with a project board being in place since the start of work on the strategy itself, with oversight and direction and representation from those departments. So although over the past couple of years the strategy has been in draft form, there was a broad consensus. The public consultation very strongly supported the vision and objectives and policy commitments, and that did allow us to undertake some early planning work with the development of a draft action plan. That had to remain in draft whilst the strategy was in draft, and it was limited mainly to work within the department, but I think we felt it was important that there was some progress made towards some of the objectives based on the strong public consultation support that we had for those fundamentals. So next slide, please. So this is a very brief summary of some of the early actions, just to give an overview, a flavour of some of the things that were progressed in the interim. Providing more social intermediate homes, and that has included the development of the intermediate rent product, which was published in March 2023, and is really aimed at providing an additional rental choice in that affordable sector for lower to moderate income households. Housing executive revitalisation, which entails scoping proposals around tackling the NIHE investment challenge. Implementation of the fundamental review of allocations. And then another key area of work around the private rented sector. The private rented sector has had, massive publicity in recent months, over the past 6 months to a year, in terms of the growth and cost of the private rented sector. And work is progressing there in the first phase of private rented sector reform, and as set out in the Private Tenancies Act in 2022, really working towards trying to make the private rented sector a better tenure for those who wish to use it and live in it. And then information workshops and key issues. We've been able to progress some of those key issues, such as water, wastewater infrastructure, and skills. We've been able to undertake a couple of early workshops to start to look at some of those issues and see where early work can begin, where the issues are, and try and progress something with that. And then most recently, engagement with local council officers, particularly in the context of local development plans, which are starting to be published now across councils, and have a vital role to play, obviously, in the areas that they serve. And as those begin to be published, some of the policies, certainly affordable housing policies, that are starting to be applied and how those are applied. So an early seminar was held between ourselves, the housing executive, and local planning officers and development plan officers as an early start, including those from Derry City and Strabane as well, to sort of discuss some of the links between wider evidence and policy in the emerging local development plans, and begin to have a look at some of the barriers that are being faced in that and some of the issues that are starting to emerge. And we hope to expand on the content of that and the involvement in that in the coming months. So that's really a very quick overview of the strategy, how it's progressed, where it originated from, what some of the fundamentals are, and what work we have been able to do in the absence of an executive. We have another slide then about the new build social housing programme, which I believe my colleague Heloise will be able to take you run through.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Heloise Brown. I work on social housing policy oversight in DFC. So I'm just here to say a little bit about the social housing development programme, which is delivered between the department, the housing executive, and registered housing associations. So the department will set the overall housing policy as well as provide the funding for the development programme. And it maintains the housing association guide, and part of that guide provides housing associations with guidance on development and procurement of the programme, including technical and value for money considerations. So there's a few real challenges for the programme at the moment, and they overlap quite considerably with the issues that Chris has been outlining. Land availability, obviously, for social housing is one of the biggest challenges. And to try and address that issue, we're working with LPS and the housing executive to look at surplus public land sites that can be released to housing associations for development. So LPS have developed a government land and property register, which the housing executive have access to. That can be used to identify public land that has the potential for social housing in areas of need. And eventually all government departments will have their assets published to that register. There are 6 departments, including DFC, on there so far. And in those areas where there is housing need and that's identified, housing associations are encouraged to look out for potential sites for development, as set out in the housing executive's commissioning prospectus, which accompanies the programme, and you'll find a lot of detail of that on the housing executive's website. Planning and infrastructure obviously is another big challenge. We frequently have highlighted to us the capacity restrictions of the water and sewage infrastructure. So the delivery of some much needed housing can sometimes be delayed as developers may be unable to connect to the wastewater network. And what we do is encourage developers to engage as early as possible with the planning process to identify any possible capacity issues and alternative solutions, wastewater package plants and sustainable drainage systems. These tend to only be feasible in the larger scale developments due to the cost. And obviously increased costs can have an impact on the budget, so fewer costs may be delivered and housing need then continues to rise. So the housing executives working with NI Water to undertake analysis to assist with the identification of priority areas, which we hope will inform future housing and infrastructure discussions. So we will have more of a joining up between areas of housing need and areas for investment. And while fast tracking of social housing planning applications doesn't happen in any of the council areas, we know that some councils prioritise social housing applications given the timescales. Those applications are still subject to the same process as every other planning application. Special sittings have taken place, particularly towards the end of the year, which will assist with the approval of planning applications. And that is really crucial at the year end, because it will enable the department and the housing executive to meet their target and the housing associations to begin on site. So the team within the housing executive, the development programme group and the regional place shaping teams will regularly engage with council planning staff to monitor progress and try and resolve any outstanding issues. And Chris has outlined the housing supply strategy. That's a huge opportunity to seek increased funding by highlighting the impact that underinvestment in infrastructure can have, and that will continue to have, on efforts to address social disadvantage and provide more housing in areas of need. So it's planning, there's wastewater infrastructure that act as constraints on housing supply, but also new roads are really critical for opening land for new supply, and departmental officials will engage with Department for Infrastructure to progress actions to ensure that planning for new roads takes account of housing supply demands, particularly in those areas of high need. And again, that's work that can be progressed under the banner of the strategy. And just lastly, on energy efficiency, we want to encourage housing associations to innovate. They get public funding, we want to support them to do that. The department will fund that innovation as pilots at the appropriate grant rate to inform our future policy decisions, and we can do that through potential guide amendments for the development programme. So that requires housing associations to apply for additional grant funding to cover the actual extra costs associated with the innovation measures that they suggest. That gives them some license to consider how to better the scheme in terms of energy efficiency and decarbonisation above the current NI building regulation standards. And we hope then that will ultimately reduce the amount of retrofitting that would be required as these new homes are built that will help to achieve the net zero target by 2050. So that's a few of the challenges that are ongoing at the moment, and there are a few figures there just on that slide around the budget, which is a bit lower than usual this year because of the restrictions, and the starts achieved, which again is lower than we would like and lower than there's evidence of need. But when we look at those multi-years, 8,619 new homes started, 6,895 completed, 729 million invested by the NI executive and by DFC through the housing executive. So substantial amounts of money going into this programme each year and going in consistently that really help to build capacity within the housing association sector and to get that chain of supply. And what we tend to find is if the budget dips a little bit and requires a lower target, then some of that capacity is lost. And that's really the rationale for trying to keep building the programme and building the delivery every year, as well, obviously, as the very significant waiting lists and the evidence of housing need that is there. So that concludes the presentation. Chris and I would be happy to discuss this with you and take any questions that you have.
That's great. Thank you, Christopher and Heloise. I do have a number of indicated speakers at this point, so I'm just going to work my way through them. We'll take them in groups and then come back to yourselves for responses to any comments or questions. Firstly, Councillor Sandra Duffy.
Good Chair, and thank you to Christopher and Eloise for the presentation. I have to say, anytime there is a housing presentation to this council, there is always great interest in it. We are obviously all in the midst of a housing crisis, but sometimes in terms of Derry City in particular, we feel that we are at the heart of it at times, with properties in the social housing area going for 220 plus points. You're not getting housed in anything less, so there's always great interest in it. We did completely welcome the previous minister and the housing strategy that was put forward there, which was the biggest shake-up of housing for over 50 years in terms of plans for over 100,000 houses to be built, with a third of those being affordable. This was absolutely welcomed and something that we all are looking forward to seeing implementation of. In terms of some of the challenges that you have highlighted around land availability and planning and infrastructure, my colleague will take some of those. But around, I think that at this point, we just need to welcome the fact that the Assembly is back, the progress is being made in terms of the strategy, and that we do have a minister in place now who hopefully will take this on board and take it forward. You have highlighted the huge amount of public consultation that has been carried out in relation to it, and of course then the huge support that we have got from that consultation for these recommendations to go forward. So hopefully we will see the strategy completely signed off and implementation start soon. Understand in terms of budgets and how challenging things can be, but housing is one of the biggest issues that is facing us as a society, with housing waiting list in this area of being over 5,000 on the waiting list. You talked about prioritising housing solutions for the most vulnerable, and I have to say, as a council area, we are very keen to see the delivery of DIME, and I'm glad to see that that is progressing through the system and through tendering at present. So that is good to see. In existing properties, I think it's really important that we work to address some of the issues of repairs, damp and maintenance that we are seeing constantly coming through our doors of constituency offices, where particularly damp is causing issues to people's health. Children and elderly are particularly suffering as a result of maintenance not being carried out. You've talked about the retrofitting of existing homes and how important this is in terms of addressing not only the climate crisis, but also the cost of living crisis. And it would be good to hear a wee bit more in terms of how that is going to progress. I know we've had a number of presentations and talk of pilot schemes in relation to the retrofitting, but I would be keen to hear about how that could be rolled out further and what sort of timescales we could be looking at around that issue, because it is an issue that can absolutely make a difference to people and how they're living and their health. You have touched again on workforce planning and how the skills are absolutely necessary in taking these forward. And I'm sure there could be partnerships here with our local colleges in terms of making sure that we have local young people trained up with the skills necessary to carry out the strategy. I think I'm content enough that I'm content to see that the strategy has been progressing in the absence of a minister. But now that we have the Assembly back up and running, we have a minister in place, I am keen to see that the strategy will be signed off and will be implemented. So thank you again for your presentation. Always good to hear about how housing is progressing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Farrell?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Chris and Heloise for coming today. When the initial invite was sent to DFC, it was because there was no minister in place, we had no government in place, nobody had any idea what was happening with the housing supply strategy. So thanks for coming. So we have discussed housing probably on this committee every month for the last 2 or 3 years. In recent months, we've had the chief executive of the housing executive, we've had the regional manager of the housing executive, we've had the area manager of the housing executive, we've had the chief executive of Apex, we've had the chief executive of the Northern Ireland Federation for Housing Associations. And what is clear across the chamber is that more houses need to be built across this council area. So the new strategy is welcome, and I hope that it's signed off by the executive very soon. I hope that the new communities minister makes this a key priority in terms of his portfolio. I hope it's in the programme for government, because the reality on the ground across this city and district is that there aren't enough houses being built. The latest housing waiting list is that there's now over 5,800 people waiting to be housed across this city and district. That's the highest per capita across the entire north. And the waiting list is just growing and growing and growing every day. And I think housing, dealing with housing issues, trying to get people more points to get housed is probably the biggest issue for councillors in this chamber. I know personally, I'm contacted every single day by new people trying to get more points, trying to get housed. So more houses need to be built, and I see that the number one key objective was to increase supply, and the supply just isn't there at the minute. I know there are plans in place, there's developments being constructed as we speak, I know there's plans further on down the line for more houses, but what we have learnt over the years is that we have a social housing development programme which is meant to eradicate homelessness, and every year it increases and increases. So it is clear to us that not enough houses are being built. So it should be a priority for the new Communities Minister. It should be a priority for the entire executive. But I know it's in draft form at the minute. We're hopeful it's going to be signed off soon. But has there been any conversations about which areas are going to be priority? Because I know the vision is 100,000 social and affordable homes over the next 15 years. And a third of those are going to be social. So it's 2,222 new houses per year. Have you had any discussions? Have you had any plans about where those additional are going to go? Because we've the highest percentage across the north. We'd obviously want to make the argument for more investment across Derry and Strabane. I would imagine all our councils are going to have a similar but very different view. So have you done any modelling about where you see these 33,000 social homes going over the next 15 years? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farrell. I'm going to take Alderman Hussey, and then I'm going to come back to Christopher and Heloise, and then I do have a couple other indicated speakers after that. So Alderman Hussey, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. Apologies if my voice is a bit rough. I'm asking a slightly different question. I'm supporting previous colleagues in that there is a housing need within our entire district, as was emphasised by the last contributor. I note the reference to thriving and inclusive communities and spaces. My concern is that indicating a policy of urbanisation within the department, within housing executive, etc., on social housing, because there are thriving and inclusive places which are not designated settlements. And within your plans going forward, what sort of percentage do you consider appropriate to have in the truly rural remainder and in our smaller settlements? Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Christopher and Heloise, have you any comments, responses there? Pass back to yourselves.
Yes, I'll start just from the strategy side. So yeah, thank you for those comments about the strategy. It's much appreciated. Yeah, in terms of the public consultation point was raised about the public consultation, yes, a lot of work went into that consultation process and those stages, and that was primarily the reason that we were able to take some confidence in our ability to move forward with some limited actions, albeit they were mainly confined within the department. Yeah, the issues of infrastructure and land availability, as I mentioned, are significant, and that my kind of emphasis on that whole system approach slide was for a reason, which is that recognition of those big issues that need to be addressed, and that was always, I suppose, the intention as to why this would be considered for an executive strategy on the basis that those issues cut across so many areas, and in order to address supply, it really has to be done in some kind of coordinated fashion with a cross-departmental agreement and approach. Resourcing is going to be difficult and budgets are going to be tight. So if we're going to pull those together, there needs to be some level of coordination that can allow that to happen. There was a mention there about the retrofitting of homes. I'm hearing more about that. I can't give you too much more detail. It's not my particular area of expertise, but there has been, since the strategy was developed, the work on climate change has increased with its own. There is its own division within the department now that's looking at the residential decarbonisation action plan, which is a part of the wider climate action plan. So there is a significant focus now. As I say, that wasn't in place at the start of the strategy outset. that kind of focused work. But since then, that has really ramped up, and that has its own focus now, and ensuring that we can deliver where possible on that very important issue. Some other points there. Yeah, I mean, in terms of areas to be prioritised, I suppose again with the strategy at this stage, the purpose of the strategy in its form, and what will be a final strategy, hopefully in the future, is as a framework to deliver on it. It isn't area specific. I suppose the likes of the local development plans are really going to be the manifestation of what happens at a local level, with this the kind of the overarching strategy aims and the framework it provides to develop actions and policies that can then develop and open the door for supply in all areas, and for areas to be able to take advantage of those. And when the likes of local development plans are coming out and development is being planned, it can actually be delivered. As I know, there are some difficulties in delivering schemes and having the capacity to do that. In terms of the modelling on the number, I mean, the number that's in the strategy is really reflective of an ambition. It's not really intended as a target as such. It's a policy positive number in that it could change. It could potentially change up or down, with the potential for it to increase if the policies and the weight given to housing in an executive is high enough with that ambition to increase that number. Then that can happen. I know the likes of the housing executive and the HGIs, the housing growth indicators, the strategic housing market assessment as well, are models that are done by the NIHE and by DFI for the housing growth indicators. But the strategy is slightly different, and it's reflective of an ambition, depending on the kind of weight and the resources that are given to it. And then there was a question there about on the thriving and inclusive communities and the policy of urbanisation in the department. I don't think it would be saying a policy of urbanisation. I think that the genuine intention with that was that when we talk about thriving and inclusive communities, places where people want to live, and wherever that may be, and whether that is an urban or a rural area, the strategy had a rural impact assessment done with it, completed, and that was certainly a part of it. We did consultation, covered both urban and rural issues. It's factored into the EQIA, and we do recognise there are different needs there, and the strategy and actions will have to respond to that. And we've been connected with the NIHE in terms of its reaching rural strategy, to make sure that we are connected with that, and that where we can join up and assist with that, we will try and do that. Heloise, I don't know if you wanted that in line just from social perspective.
Thank you, Chris. Just to come back on a couple of points, we really welcome all of those comments. It's really welcome that interest in housing and in delivering for communities and meeting that significant level of need that is out there. Just on the point about existing properties and repairs and damp and mould, we particularly encourage you to be aware of the guidance that is out there for housing associations. It's on the department's website, and it's been published just within the last few months, and that really sets out what we expect of associations. We know the housing executive have taken damp and mould very seriously as well, and all of those social housing providers are looking really closely at tenant awareness and making sure that tenants know when to report, and then that everyone going into the home, like the patch managers going in, are aware of the signs to spot, so everybody's sort of becoming more aware of how to raise an issue and how to get that addressed. On retrofit and the NIHE investment, you may have seen the rent increase that was announced, and Gráinne Long would have drawn attention to the really significant investment in energy efficiency that is planned for the housing executive stock this year. So around 40 million, partly funded by the rent increase, that will go into thermal efficiency measures in housing executive homes. And that is part of a programme that we want to keep going, and we know the housing executive wants to be able to keep going because it does help to build skills, and it builds the industry here that can then respond across all the different tenure types. Just to follow up on Chris's point about sort of which areas are priority, the local development plan issue obviously will set those things out, but the housing executive, because it's at arm's length from the department, will deliver sort of strategic guidelines that assess housing need and enable the area choice or the area selection for the greatest need for the social development programme. part of that again is the settlements that are rural. There was a target in the social housing development programme for to try and deliver about 10% of rural homes. It's a struggle. It's a really ambitious target, and it's difficult. It's difficult to achieve, and we have spent quite a bit of time the last couple of years looking at how we can really improve and bear down on that and get housing associations keen to build in more rural areas. So you may be aware of the latent demand tests that the housing executive will periodically do for villages and rural areas. We'd really encourage that you sort of promote those if you see them. If you see the housing executive, that you're promoting those for given areas, that you encourage people to notify their interest to the housing executive, because that will then inform the level of demand that they assess for that particular area. We've done some other work around analysis of sort of averages of benefit information to try and tell us where there might be private sector tenants, for example, who are maybe paying quite high rents, who might therefore have a social demand, and that might inform those latent demand tests. Just looking at different options and different ways that we can assess what the demand is in rural areas. And one of the fundamental review of social housing allocations recommendations that has been implemented recently was looking very much at areas of choice, so that people could still choose sort of common landlord areas that are quite small, but that they could choose a larger number of areas. And that means if people see that they have maybe a higher chance of being housed in an urban area, but they would like a rural area, they can put down up to 99 areas of choice, and that will also help to evidence to the housing executive the need for demand in that local area. So again, if you're approached by constituents who are looking at need in rural areas, you'd really encourage them to use that opportunity to put down their areas of choice and to include rural as well, and that will, over time, that will help to build an evidence base. So I hope that was helpful in terms of the comments raised so far.
Thank you both. So I've got 3 further indicated speakers, and then we'll come back to yourselves, Chris and Heloise. So Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the DFC representatives who came in today to join us in the chamber. And I suppose it's, given that Stormont is up and running again, it's very timely that you're here. Look, I think it's no secret that there is a housing crisis in the north, and that we have an acute waiting list levels here in the Derry and Strabane district. As Councillor Farrell said, they're the highest in the north per capita. So there's a massive expectation that Stormont will start acting on this very, very quickly. I think it's important to acknowledge that the reason why there is a crisis, which has been getting worse year on year, despite the efforts of many in the sector to build more houses, is because of the privatisation of housing stock, and then the denial of funding to the housing executive to build more houses and to upgrade its existing stock. That's why we have a crisis that has got worse year on year. So there is, we need more houses built, and that's what Stormont will be judged on. It's not going to be about anything other than, are we going to actually see the waiting lists come down, and how quickly is that going to happen? So, I think that there is a new minister now for the DFC. I hope that minister is committed to social housing, because in the past I would question whether or not his party have been. And so that's one thing of concern. And I think that means that we can't just leave it to the executive to get on with it. I think that there will need to be campaigning to make sure houses are built. The second thing that gives me great worry is that there's a lot of tension right now in a lot of communities here in Derry and right across the district about housing. People are watching HMOs being built, or homes being turned into HMOs, being turned into guest houses, being turned into bed and breakfasts. And what we're not seeing is homes for families who are on the waiting list and who are desperate to get a house. And that is creating a lot of frustration. And the number of points that people need has just climbed and climbed and climbed, especially over the last couple of years, the astronomical levels. So I'm looking at the south as well, because there is a massive housing crisis in the south. And we see far-right agitators putting the blame for that housing crisis onto asylum seekers and refugees, burning down buildings, attacking children in the streets, and holding hate marches in the middle of Dublin. Now, the reason why that housing crisis has happened in the south is not because of asylum seekers or migrants. It's because the Irish government failed to build enough houses, failed to build enough social housing. And I think a lot of people are worried that those types of agitators are around here as well, and will seize on the failure of the government to build enough houses, blame that on vulnerable people. So that's why there is a huge urgency right now to see delivery. Look, 33 houses over 15,000 a year, 15 years sounds like a lot, and I suppose it would be a lot if we weren't in a housing crisis, but I think we need to move quicker. I think we need to very quickly move into a situation where we're doing a mass social housing build. I would like to see that, and I think most people would like to see that led by the housing executive. But that means that the housing executive has to get access to the kind of funding that will allow it to take the lead, and so that it can be properly resourced. Then just on the private rental market, I mean, I know that there is in the document as well, you talked about the private rental market, and again, the prices of rentals in Derry and across the district, and I'm sure across the north, has escalated massively over the last couple of years. In my own area now, there is basically a bed sit, a one-room bed sit going for £650 a month. And this has just become unaffordable for people. So, there is no rent regulations. There is no attempt by Stormont to put any restrictions on what can be charged or cap prices. So there is runaway, the price right now of a rental, of a house, of a flat. In many places, they're just moving beyond what people can afford. So, building more social housing, I think, can address and actually increasing the overall supply of houses can put a dent in what is being charged as well for private rentals, because there's unfortunately, there's a lot of profiteering happening right now, and it's soaring people in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Look, I appreciate that you've come in here today, but look, there's big expectations, and I think that there's urgency for the executive to act very quickly on housing to address many of these challenges we face.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Councillor Jackson.
Very good, Chair, and again, I just want to welcome you to the chamber today. And in relation to the presentation, it's largely welcome because we all know it's already been well rehearsed that housing is by far the largest issue that elected reps face on a day-to-day basis. We are in the midst of a housing crisis, and if we're going to do anything to deliver for the people and deliver on the needs of people here, we need government to work together. So we need departments to be working closely along with local councils to develop development plans, to ensure that adequate resources are put in place, that the relevant infrastructure is there, to build homes and build communities. The presentation certainly sets out the right direction, but the reality is that it hasn't always been that way, and it's like, as a council, we're undergoing the first element of our local development plan. One of the biggest constraints that we had in the midst of a housing crisis, one of the biggest constraints is the housing growth indicators that were set out by the Department of Communities. I know it was highlighted there that there was involvement from the Department of Infrastructure, but it was the Department of Communities that put the constraints that directed this council to tone down our ambitions to deliver more zoned housing land, and that is the reality. So if we're going to see a step change in the delivery or overcoming the challenges for delivery of adequate social housing, then we need a change of direction and a change of attitude from at a departmental level as well. There's like this area, without doubt, has a significant number on the waiting lists. But despite that, there's applications coming to this council for social housing developments that haven't got the support of the housing executive. Now that is disgraceful, in my view. You've got a competent housing authority under the direction of the Department of Communities that are failing to support social housing applications. It's mind-boggling. So if we have to be honest with ourselves and say, if we're going to see real change, if we're going to see the delivery of the numbers of houses that we need, there needs to be a step change. There needs to be a change of attitude at a departmental level. And I know that from hearing from the voices within this chamber, local elected representatives, we realise the pressures. We realise the need to look outside the box and look to develop opportunities for social housing and try to accelerate the delivery of social housing within this council area. Unfortunately, to date, we haven't had the same approach from departmental from the department, and it's, if we don't see that change of attitude, we're going to continue in the same vein where we're going to see delivery of social housing schemes, but the housing waiting lists are going to continue to rise. And that's that. If we're going to continue to go through the motions, we're going to be failing the thousands and thousands of people that are sleeping in their granny's sofa with their children because they've nowhere, they live on their own. They can't afford the prices of private renting, and even in the cases where people can afford, there's simply no availability. So we need a change of attitude. The direction that's been set out in this presentation is very welcome, but we want to see that reflected in the engagement that we receive from the department as well. I hope as we move through our development plan that and I hope as social housing providers bring in planning applications to our council, that we will have the support of the Department of Communities and that we'll have the support of the housing executive. But to date, I am deeply concerned from the direction of travel that we're currently on. But we essentially, if we want to see the change, we need to develop a very close working relationship between local council and the department. And I hope this is a first step along that journey, because we can't afford to continue to keep doing the same things as we've been doing. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Alderman Cook and then Councillor Donnelly, and then I'm going to go back to Christopher and Heloise for closing comments and remarks and responses. Go ahead, Alderman Cook.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in, and thanks to Chris and Heloise for their presentation. A lot of what I was going to say has already been said or answered anyway, so it was more as well for a geographical clarification. But the long and short of it, nearly 6,000 people on a waiting list, and one that's growing every single day. It just shows the demand here. So thanks for answering the questions, and we'll be keen to hear the finalised strategy. So thanks for presenting to our committee, and thanks, Chair, for letting me in.
Thank you, Alderman Cook. Councillor Donnelly, online there.
Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Look, like Alderman Cook, we a lot of it has already been said, but the answer to this, there is a scramble for points, and people are angry and frustrated, and I do see this spilling over. Councillor Harkin touched on it there. There is a frustration and a very tangible, very visible anger amongst people that you're dealing with on a daily basis, and they're looking for somebody to blame it on. And unfortunately, people are beginning to punch down instead of punch up at the government. I'm not a fan of Stormont, but you know, it is in place and it needs to produce, because at the minute, millions and millions of pounds are being spent on you know, like sticking plaster solutions and B&Bs and hotels. That money should be invested in proper sustainable housing. The housing executive, you know, should be allowed to borrow on the strength of their assets and build proper housing. And the rents from that housing will go back into the housing executive, and you know, it's there then for other bills or for to do proper repairs. The housing executive staff, I believe, are under immense pressure. You can see it in them when you're talking to them, and they're very concerned of where all this is going. So to call it a crisis is not, you know, it's not hyping it up. It is literally a crisis, and it will, you know, we have to remember that the housing executive came out of the civil rights movement where people took to the streets. And I do believe that when Councillor Harkin says that there is a demand almost at the minute that for people to take to the streets in order for this problem to be solved. At the minute, because you know, we don't have the housing executive building in any great numbers, it's private developers and housing associations which are doing it, and that isn't, in my opinion, it's not the answer, particularly private developers. But housing associations, you do not get the same quality that you would get with the housing executive. So we need to have the housing executive to be able to borrow and build proper housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Christopher and Heloise, I'll pass back to yourselves.
Thank you. I'll just come in on the housing executive revitalisation before you come back, Chris, if that's okay. I mean, I would just be really keen to reassure you that this has continued to be a focus. There isn't very much that we can say in terms of detail, but we have continued to work on this very actively to look for solutions and to find ways that will enable the housing executive to borrow without that impacting on the public debt, and then to enable it to get the investment that it needs to keep its stock sustainable and to keep it viable for future years. So, you know, I can't give you a lot of detail, but I do want to reassure you that that's absolutely a priority for us. The housing executive is the largest landlord we have. We couldn't function without those homes, and obviously, as you say, the waiting lists are as significant as they are, and the demand is as high as it is. So it is essential that we make the best of the stock we have, and that we keep it in the best condition that we can. In terms of new build as well, I just want to say, you know, it is absolutely our ambition and the Housing Association's ambition and the Housing Executive's ambition that we continue to grow and build a development programme to deliver more social homes. It is one of those areas where we're entirely reliant on capital budget, and we keep arguing for it and keep trying to build a case for growing the programme sequentially over years. This is the first year where the budget has dropped back a bit because of the capital allocation. I have to say, some of the comments you raised have been fairly new to me in terms of the constraints on growth and the housing executive and its support or lack of support for social housing applications, but I'm happy to look into that further within the department and discuss with the housing executive, particularly in respect of their role in terms of place shaping. And you know, I do understand we get correspondence obviously very regularly, and we understand the frustrations for people, and we absolutely are committed to delivering a programme that will grow supply in terms of social. And I know Chris obviously is focused sort of cross tenure, so I'll let you come in now, Chris, as well.
Yeah, thanks, Eloise. Yeah, just I suppose a couple of points just to finish on that. Yeah, I mean, the point about the need to increase supply generally seems like a very simple one, but it's a very, very true one. And, you know, lack of supply generally, and that is why this is a cross tenure strategy, is that, you know, lack of supply in one tenure will have an impact on the tenures around it. And you have the impacts like you see perhaps in the private rented sector. You know, when there's limited supply in other tenures, and that's where people have the option to move, or the only option to move to, then prices with supply and demand naturally will increase. So yes, needing to increase supply in all tenures, and that's always been the main tenet of this strategy. I mentioned some of in the action planning work we've been able to do, in terms of trying to increase the availability of affordable products. The department has expanded the definition of affordable housing. That's allowed that to be more products to be brought forward. Continue to try and maintain funding for shared ownership housing, and also for the development of the new intermediate rent policy as an effort to bring more products, affordable products, to the market that may offer other alternatives. And then just one other point then about the need for councils and central government to work together from a strategy point of view and strategy team point of view. Certainly local government has always been an important stakeholder. And I mentioned as a sort of a recent example, the engagement with local planning staff across all councils that we undertook in December as a kind of an initial seminar to look at sharing information between ourselves and local council officials initially, who are involved in development plan and development management side of things, and also community planning, to try and see where the information is missing that they need, what the issues they're starting to see as the LDP start to emerge, what their concerns are, certainly in the realm of affordable policies, how those will work in reality and what issues they're facing, and trying to make sure we maintain that connection with them so we can get the best possible outcome. And we'll continue to do that and bring in additional stakeholders from the local council side of things as we can. So yeah, thank you for all that input today. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Christopher and Heloise, for both the presentation and your responses to the comments. I think it was made very clear about how much of an important issue housing is particularly in this district. And we are in the midst of a crisis, so we really appreciate you being here, listening, and hopefully taking everything that's been said back to your department. You are welcome to stay if you want, but we're going to move on with the rest of the business of the committee. But thanks again to both of you. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, folks. So item 7 on our agenda for today is item 6 is chairperson's business. I don't have any, which is why I jumped on to item 7. Is matters arising from the open minutes of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee held on Tuesday, the 9th of January. Ellen has one wee point to raise first, but if anybody else has any matters arising, just indicate, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And members are asked to note that there was an inaccuracy in the January GSP minutes, and as those minutes have already been ratified at full council on the 31st of January, they cannot be amended. And the amendment therefore should be noted in the minutes of this meeting. Specifically, members will note that in terms of GSP 524, the vote there should have read 10 for, 1 against and 1 abstention. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Ellen. Is there any other matters arising from the minutes of last month's meeting? No? Okay, well, we'll move on then. Oh, sorry, Christopher, go ahead.
Chair, it's not a matter of raising it, and apologies for jumping back, but declaration of interest, if I must at the start, can I declare an interest in item 11?
Well, that'll be noted. Thanks, Christopher. Okay, so item 8 is the Q3 financial outturn for 23-24, and I'll pass over to Alfie for that report.
Thanks, Chair. Members, the report is for you to consider and approve our 9-month or our Q3 financial outturn and position at 31st of December. It's obviously in the context of the 73.96 million net expenditure budget that was agreed as part of the rates process back in February 23, and as summarised in section 2.1 of the report for your reference. It's obviously important that you're provided with regular updates in relation to performance against budget, in particular to identify any financial issues or pressures, and this report provides the position after 9 months. So members, a detailed report is provided in the appendix 1, and it's summarised in section 3.1 of the report. And you'll note that the outturn position being reported is 42k ahead of target at month 9. There's two important elements to that. Essentially, the first element is 1.292 million in savings. The second element of that is 1.25 million, which we've retained for our revised reserves reduction strategy, which you'll be aware of as part of the rates process. That's obviously critical as part of that process, which is currently ongoing. So members, just running through the elements of the savings part of that. So firstly, our income levels have seen significant growth, which is really positive. The areas where we're seeing that is in relation to leisure, which is particularly positive, which shows recovery following the pandemic. Tower museum, building controls and planning, cemeteries, off-street car parking and bank interest. Secondly, members, significant savings have been generated in our utility costs. You'll recall at the time of the rates, we had to increase our budget significantly to reflect the prices at that time, and thankfully those have reduced, generating a significant savings. Thirdly, members, and as we always try to do, we try to continue to generate savings across all our services in relation to overhead expenditure, travel and vacancy control. So against those positives, members, there's a couple of pressure issues highlighted in the report. You'll note that 834k has been ring-fenced within the leisure budgets in relation to maintenance and health and safety priorities. Those include lux lighting levels, etc. And all those issues, members, will be subject to a more detailed report to Health and Community Committee in due course for expenditure approval. Also, members, we obviously had a corporate savings target this year to achieve, and that's obviously been reduced from the budget of 187k up to Q3. So thankfully we've achieved that, given that we're in a slight surplus position at this point. A number of the unbudgeted costs and pressures, including increased insurance premiums and rate support grant cuts, we thankfully had provided for those within our financial contingency reserve, and had we not done so, obviously the position wouldn't be as positive today. Just another couple areas, members, to highlight. Currently, we're projecting a 324k positive variance in relation to rates income. Those figures come from Land and Property Services. That hasn't been reported in the report, members, on the basis of the number of non-domestic properties remaining under appeal and the increased potential for bad debt write-off, as has been highlighted within the report. And finally, in relation to capital financing, you'll see that the budget will be fully utilised this year as part of financing our ongoing fully funded 90 million programme of investment. And obviously we're considering a funding strategy for our remaining aspirations as part of the ongoing rates process. The final element of that is, as part of the rates process each year, we're required to set a number of prudential and treasury indicators which aim to monitor capital expenditure and ensure that our capital plans are affordable, prudent and sustainable. We're required to report against those indicators each quarter, and that report is attached in Appendix 2, and gladly there's no issues in relation to that. So members, in summary, the overall 42k positive outturn position, it's extremely positive given the substantial savings programme that we've had to implement this year. In essence, we've generated a surplus of 1.292 million up to this point, of which 1.25 million has had to be earmarked to finance our revised reserves reduction strategy. So the recommendation is that you approve the Q3 outturn position and the associated considerations as detailed in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alfie. Anyone like to make any comments on that report? Councillor Hartman, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Alfie, for the report. And look, I think we'll all welcome the savings, and I also, it's great to see our leisure services is generating revenue, and it's exceeding pre-COVID levels. And we want to thank staff who are helping to drive that. But it also, I think, validates our investment in the leisure as well. And so I think that is all the more reason to be confident about further investment in our leisure across the district. Look, in that document, Alfie, because of the failure of central government, we had to spend another 3.5 million on the City of Derry Airport. That was because there was no minister to take action around the case of the council for central government to take responsibility for funding the City of Derry Airport. Also in the document are, and it's acknowledged, is the rate support grant cuts. And what that meant is that people in our district had to carry the burden of those costs. And again, that was down to not having a government. No, we couldn't have any minister to sign off on anything. And we are expected to this week again sign off on rates. So, and I know we're in this is a confidential discussion, but to my mind already, the rates that's being proposed is an unacceptable burden for our ratepayers across the district. And we do have a government now, and we do have ministers. So I think that in the confidential meeting, we talked about meeting with those ministers this week in order to stress to them the urgency as a council for action on the City of Derry Airport and also on the rate support grant. And I don't just see the rate support grant that goes up to like last year's level. I mean, we need to be, if there isn't money in the 3.3 billion that is supposedly coming through Stormont, if some of that money isn't going to local councils to help them with the cost of living costs that we've been dealing with over the last number of years, I mean, that's a huge problem. There must be some of that money that has been earmarked for local councils. I'm not expecting Alfie to have the quick answers here, but look, there's been a lot of fanfare about the return of Stormont, but this week our council is expected to strike rates, but we need action from the ministers in order to lighten the burden on our ratepayers across the district. And there's definite ways that they can do that. It's about reversing those cuts. It's about increasing the rate support grant, and it's about taking action on the City of Derry Airport.
Is there anyone else who wants to comment on the report at this point? No? John, do you want to come on those comments? Brian, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Denny.
Thank you, Chair, and I suppose it's just to acknowledge the report and the hard work done by teams right across council to try and save that money. We all know what position we were in this time last year and the huge, I suppose, saving strategy that was put in place. And it's good to see that officers have been able to do that and lighten the burden in many ways. I agree with a lot of what Councillor Harkin has said, but I do know that the conversation that we had yesterday around those letters to ministers, etc., has been actioned, and those are all gone. So that's positive, I think. I would share Councillor Harkin's concerns around the 3.3 billion, and I'm sure many people in this chamber would, and many people across this district would as well. But in terms of a process, I think at this point, we have taken the first step. Let's see by Friday if we have a response and deal with it at that point. But I think it's only right that it's acknowledged the hard work of the officers to try and support ratepayers as best that we can. But also, it's as we do head on the tail end of this week, it is going to be difficult. But I hope, genuinely hope that there are some responses from ministers and there's some conversations taking place between now and then, because we certainly would welcome whatever support we can get within this council district from central government to lessen the burden on ratepayers across this city and district going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Jackson.
Come on, Chair, and welcome the report. I know it was difficult last year, and I know I don't know, there's a bit of a U-turn with some people in this chamber who refused to strike a rate last year because they couldn't. They couldn't support the savings, but now they're welcoming them. But we know that there was a very difficult. It was very difficult for members, and it was very difficult for officers to implement the savings that were identified as part of the rates process last year. And it's good to see that we are we're in line with budget. By and large, there's a slight surplus, but it shows the diligent work from officers over the year, and specifically the increased revenue from leisure and the Tower Museum. It shows that particular focus from council officers, they help promote the facilities, they encourage higher usage. It hasn't gone unnoticed from us as members. We appreciate that very, very challenging times, but there's officers have worked diligently through it. They ensure that we're not in the same position as we were last year. Fully endorse the comments that have been made in relation to lobbying Stormont departments for additional support, for the support that this council area needs. But it comes as no surprise. Like there's people that have never voted for rates, and they're using this paper as an opportunity to set their stall out for not voting for the rates again. That comes as no surprise. But there is some of us that are really interested in doing what's best for this council, for the thousands of workers that depend on us to assess these budgets properly and make decisions based on what's best for the city and district, rather than looking for a headline. So we will continue to work with officers and assess what's in front of us. The paper in front of us demonstrates the outworkings of a whole lot of work, a lot of careful considerations, and I have no problem with the recommendation that's in front of us, and fully endorsing that. And let's hope that we get the answers that we need over the next week. They put us in a more informed position. They set a budget for the year ahead, but it's far too serious to be playing politics with people's work, people's jobs, and services that people they really rely on. So focusing on the paper today, it's a positive story, but I want to acknowledge the work from officers that have been done right throughout the year to get us to the position we're in now. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Alderman Cook. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair, for that, man. Short and sweet. We also welcome the report and want to thank officers for all their hard work. We acknowledge the savings, so it's the first steps of a little bit of something. So we also endorse the recommendation, and thanks for that, man.
Thank you, Alderman Cook. Councillor Harkin, I'm going to ask you to be brief because you have already spoken.
Yeah, happy to be brief. Look, Councillor Jackson made a number of remarks there, which was a response, I suppose, to what I was saying. We have a document in front of us right now that is about our rates from last year. It is about our budget, and this week we are scheduled to strike a budget. So it's absolutely appropriate for any member to come in here and talk about the challenges that we face this week. And there's been very little discussion publicly about budgets because of Stormont. So we've been waiting, and we've been told for 2 years there's nothing we can do. There's nobody coming over the hill to help us. And now we're in a situation where government is back. And we should have expectations that they will do something about our council finances. And that is about ratepayers across the district not being further burdened, because they've been burdened a lot during the cost of living crisis. And it's about workers' future as well, because they pay rates. And a lot of people are actually very angry about the way in which we've increased rates over the last couple of years. So look, you know, it's not about generating headlines. This is about actually putting enough pressure on Stormont. And I do remember the First Minister saying that the Derry and the Northwest needs to be prioritised, that there needs to be an attempt to address regional disparity. So that needs to start now, not sometime next year or not never, because that's been the problem with these pledges. We get these pledges and then we don't see anything delivered on them. So this week would be a good opportunity for all the ministers to actually start addressing regional imbalance. Let's increase the rate support grant. And if this discussion in the chamber today helps to get that lifted into the headlines, that's a good thing. Because more people in the district now might be thinking about the fact that rates are to be struck this week, and people won't be happy about the rate level that is being discussed now by the council.
Okay. So we have a recommendation that's on a paper. So far, I haven't heard anybody speak against the recommendation. However, I do need a proposer and seconder just to accept Councillor Mooney and Councillor Tierney. Thank you very much. We'll move forward to item 9, which is the policy on wearing an Easter lily and the poppy in the workplace. And Ellen, I'll pass over to yourself for that, please.
Yep, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members on progress to date on implementing the a policy on wearing of the Easter lily and poppy in the workplace, and to seek members' comments and approval for the next steps in progress in this motion. The background highlights in terms of this particular motion that a number of meetings have been held over a substantial period of time and facilitated through the Centenaries Working Group, and also within that process the views of the Trade Unions and Equality Commission have been included as part of the discussions. The report also highlights that the policy development approach was based on the wearing of the Easter lily for 1 week up to Easter Sunday, and also the wearing the poppy for 1 week inclusive for Remembrance Sunday and Armistice Day. Information is also provided in terms of decisions made at a special council meeting in terms of January 2021, in which case it was agreed to carry out a staff consultation and an EQIA, and also details are provided of further reports which were brought forward in relation to that staff survey procurement exercise for external support, the results of the consultations, and also in terms of a progress report in May 22. It's highlighted that an initial draft equality impact was provided to members, was provided to council in terms of consulting with staff and the public as well in September 22. However, as I say, as we highlighted in the report, issues were identified regarding this documentation, and a clarification meeting took place in October 22 regarding those issues, and this comprised of officers from the council, the service provider, and representatives from the Equality Commission. Again, as I say, that particular meeting highlighted a number of issues and taken forward the draft policy, and also the equality impact assessment and the consultation process. And in endeavouring to progress these matters, officers have considered a number of issues, and again also brought forward another meeting with the Equality Commission in January of this year. As highlighted in the report, that there are still a number of issues that remain for review, and therefore the recommendation in front of members today that is subject to your views, and given the need to discuss a number of issues in detail, a meeting of the working group is set up as soon as practical. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Ellen. Councillor Tierney, go ahead.
Chair, thank you, and thanks to Ellen for the report and the work that has been done in this over this last 8 years. Quite a long time, but quite a difficult and I suppose in many ways a sensitive process. Look, I'm not going to harp on about it. The recommendation is that a meeting of the working group is called as soon as possible, practically possible, and I'm happy to propose that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Ellen for the report. It is frustrating that this is taking so long. and support the recommendation. They call a working group meeting as soon as possible, because it is best that we go on the working groups are the best mechanism. They go into the detail, thrash it out, and work out a way forward. A way forward that works for everybody. But I would make a slight amendment to the recommendation. I know it's already proposed, but I would like to put an amendment then that no disciplinary action is taken against any member of staff for the wearing of an Easter lily until the work of this has been addressed by council. This has been going on for far too long. Workers have been expressing their frustration to us around the inequalities within the workplace, and it needs to be addressed. So we can't have a situation where there's disciplinary action because council haven't been able to find work through the notice of motion that was tabled 8 years ago. So I want to make that slight amendment. If the proposer doesn't wish to accept that, I'm happy to make a separate proposal because I know it hasn't been seconded yet. So I can make that as a separate proposal if it hasn't accepted.
Alderman Hussey has also said he was going to propose the recommendation on the chat box. So I would take that as a proposal and second, and then yours is an amendment. Do that. Does that work? Does that work? 2 wee seconds, just to check this. I'm just going to get an opinion here from John. It's the amendment would be taken in advance of obviously the recommendation being passed. So, John.
Chair, look, obviously members, we've been asked for an opinion, in live proceedings without due opportunity to consider the matter. But it would certainly appear that an amendment proposed along those lines would de facto be an amendment to an existing policy. So that would be challenging for that to be considered to be a valid amendment at this point. That's certainly our preliminary view of that. There may be something around the wording that could be considered, but certainly in terms of how it appears to have been presented, it certainly could be construed as an amendment to the policy and therefore wouldn't be valid at this point as an amendment.
Sorry, Chair, I just missed that tail end of what John said there. It could be, but I didn't get it.
Sorry, through you, Chair, again. Again, just to say, my comments are tempered by the fact that we haven't had time to fully consider, but it would certainly appear that the suggested amendment would be construed, could be construed as an amendment to our existing policy, and therefore it wouldn't be a valid amendment.
Can I seek a wee bit of clarity on that comment? If our existing policy hasn't been established yet, how are we amending a policy that doesn't currently exist? Because it's still being worked through the working group.
Through you, Chair, there are existing, notwithstanding the draft policy that this matter deals with, there are existing policies and custom and practice upon which we rely as an organisation at this moment in time. So it's nothing to do with the draft policy. We've, in the absence of the formalisation of the draft policy, we fall back on either pre-existing policy or pre-existing custom and practice.
Chair, through yourself, I understand what you're saying in terms of there is an existing policy there, and this amendment. Could we perhaps seek legal opinion in writing with regard to that? And we can bring this to full council, as an amendment to the recommendation. We do feel that this has been sitting as a motion to council for 8 years. There is huge frustration that it has taken this long. I understand the reasons why it has taken this long through the Equality Commission, etc. But I think at this point, staff within council want to know that there is going to be no detriment to themselves for wearing an Easter lily. So could we seek something, a legal opinion in writing with regard to the amendment?
Yeah, happy enough to go ahead, Philip. Christopher Phillips saying there he's happy enough to send through the legal opinion, but if you could email him the wording of that proposed amendment, just so he can give correct advice. Is that okay?
So I have no problem doing that, but and this is my, oh no, I have no problem doing that. I just do feel that it's really, really frustrating that we're being asked our views on this as part of the recommendation. When we express our views, we're being told that they're not valid. This has been sitting for 8 years. I think us as elected representatives, those that are employed in the organisation, that are delivering services that have been denied the opportunity to express their views as in the week leading up to Easter. They've been denied the opportunities. When we've tried to put a focus on this and saying that they're going to be exempt from disciplinary action until this is finally resolved, it's not valid. I have no problem setting the views, but I do feel that it's only right that I do voice my frustration at this opportunity, because I would be keen to explore the legal opinion. I would be keen to see it in writing, and take it from there. But I'll send that to you directly, Philip. Thanks, Chair.
Through you, Chair, that would be very helpful. Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I think just to say to members, this is an exceptionally challenging proposal from Council for officers to implement, and we are endeavouring to do our absolute to take forward the corporate decision of Council. There are a whole range of issues that we need to discuss with you in the working group with regard to the work done to date and the direction of travel, which is why we had suggested and proposed a meeting of the working group to take forward these issues. Completely and utterly understand the frustration, but but perhaps we can share with you through the meeting of the working group the frustration that we have as officers in trying to take this forward and try to strike with you a path as to how we might progress this.
Thank you, John. So we just send that across. I do have a number of further indicated speakers. I've got Alderman Hussey, then yourself, Alderman Cook, Councillor Tierney, Councillor Donnelly, and then Councillor Gallagher. So Alderman Hussey, go ahead.
I'm okay. Chair, go on ahead.
No bother. Alderman Cook.
Thanks, Chair. Just for clarification, when was the last Centenaries Working Group held? 2022.
Chair, I don't have an exact date. It's quite some time ago. The purpose of the working group was to initially consider the draft policy. The draft policy then came into the council. At that point, if you like, the work of the working group was passed over to Governance and Strategic Planning Committee. A number of actions as outlined in the report were then taken forward under the auspices of GSP. But at this juncture, we now are suggesting that we need to re-trigger the working group to discuss the issues that have arisen.
I just have some speakers, Alderman McMorris, and then I'll get you then. Councillor Tierney.
Chair, thank you. And I suppose just two small points. First one, can I just ask that the legal opinion is shared with ourselves as well in preparation for full council, if that's okay. And the second one, the recommendation is that a meeting of the working group is set up as soon as possible. Maybe this issue of the amendment could be factored into that agenda of the working group. Perhaps that could take place before full council, and then we all have an opportunity to have that discussion there in preparation and coming back to full council. Yes, but it can be amended at full council based on the outcome of the working group.
If it's helpful to members, we can set up a working group. We can trigger another meeting of the working group without requiring this to be ratified at full council, because the working group is still effectively live.
Thank you for that clarification, John. Councillor Donnelly.
Chair, look, I've been, the connection here isn't great. It's been playing up, but look, regards, it has been frustrating and it has been a while, and you know, the same frustrations that Councillor Jackson has expressed from workers, you know, I'd be getting the same. But regards the legal advice regarding workers wearing the lolly, could we factor into that too, whether there's any implications for councillors, what the position is with councillors? Are they in the same position regarding workers, regarding flags and emblems and that? So if it's possible, could we factor that into the report?
Yep, thank you for that, Councillor Donnelly. We'll see if that can be noted. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. For instance, I'm not on this committee, but I was one that brought this motion back in 2016, and one that shares the frustration of others. And I would say this, that year on year, I've kept it on the agenda. And I would like to thank the staff for bringing forward this report. It's sort of been in the air for a while. But look, it is going a long time. But probably the reasons that it is going a long time is that this has the potential to be groundbreaking. And I can appreciate council officers saying they want to get it right. And we need to get it right. And we need to go through, if you want to call it the hoops that we need to go through. But I think that once we get through them, we need to have shown that we have gone through them. and that we get out the other side, and that this is a correct way of going. There's one who sat on a number of the working groups and met with the unions and met with council officers, that if we get it wrong, it has great potential that it could get thrown out altogether. So I can very much support getting back into the working group. If we get back in ASAP, see what the issues is, and then when it comes up full council, we might be in a better position to have it thrashed out, rather than just going for an amendment here now that could have the potential to see it thrown out completely. So I would just be cautious with any amendments at this stage and let it sit to full council. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gallagher. Alderman McMorris, you're my final speaker on this item.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. Not a member of this committee, but I was just interested in the comments. In regards to this issue, I would like to ask, what was the responses from the Equality Commission in regards to this, and also in regards to the amendment to the proposal. To me, that springs up an equality issue in itself. The fact that they're requesting that no disciplinary action is taken against workers for the wearing of the lily, and at no stage was the poppy or anything else concluded on that. So I just want to ask, is that an equality issue in itself? And what the feedback was in regard to the EQAA? Thank you.
I think well, firstly, I don't think that there is disciplinary action taken when someone's wearing a poppy, so I think that's why there was the focus put onto the lily and the amendment that Councillor Jackson was trying to bring forward. And I think that the recommendations from the Equality Commission is what's due to be discussed in the working group. Would that be a fair assessment, or if you want to come on? Yeah. So the working group will outline those details if you're happy enough with that, Alderman McMorris. Yeah. Alderman Guy, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of the committee, but could I ask that possibly all previous papers are put out to those members? Obviously, Alderman McMorris wasn't present when the last meeting came up, so she would need brought up to speed on it. There's a lot of papers to go through, so maybe it would be good to send them out to all working group members, or all members again, in fact. Do you know what I mean? So.
Yes, through you, Chair, there's very comprehensive set of papers put through to the previous meeting mentioned in there, so we can reissue all of those to give members an opportunity. We'll actually get them out very quickly and then establish the date of the working group.
Sorry, can we also have the legal response too, Philip, in regards to the query that was brought before you?
So the previous papers will include all the advices that we've received to date.
Is that including Philip's response to the amendment that he was going to respond to?
Well,
Brian, I know Brian asked for the copy of the response.
To get out all the papers that have been through a previous meeting, then Philip will obviously need a day or two to consider his legal advice, and we'll issue that separately.
Yep. All right. Cheers.
Thank you, John. Councillor Cheney, very, very quickly, because
I will be quick. It's just a small query. Has there ever been an issue with a member of staff wearing the Easter lily before? And if there was, what type of disciplinary action would council consider taking on that member of staff? Because we could be talking here for the last 20 minutes about something that isn't an issue. Just want to know if someone was to wear an Easter lily, what would be the type of disciplinary action that council would be taking? Thank you.
Just through the chair, in terms of it has never been brought to my attention, or I've never had to deal with an issue concerning an employee allegedly wearing the Easter lily at work. And in terms of disciplinary action and the level of disciplinary sanction, I wouldn't be in a position to confirm that, because all matters that go that far have to be investigated thoroughly in light of the circumstances, so I wouldn't be in a position to say what sanction that individual would get, but to date, I've not been, it has never been brought to my attention that an employee has been in the workplace with an Easter lily.
Thank you, Paula. Councillor Donnelly, I've just seen your name in the chat box. Were you looking back in? Just before, I'm going
just
to
a
close
quick-
off this item, but go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Look, just in light of Councillor Gallagher's comments, I'm just, I see where he's coming from about, reports and this and that, which may or may not have an effect on the sort of working group or the attitudes in the working group. So I'm not convinced, that it's the reports now before that might be the right way to go. That maybe coming into the working group and knock our heads together and see where it's going. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Councillor Donnelly. So Councillor Tierney and Alderman Hussey had both proposed the recommendation that was on the report. So I can take one as proposed and one as seconded. Yep. Aye. Okay, and we'll try and get that working group did as quickly as possible. Yep. Okay. So we will move forward, folks. Item 10 is the review of the members' risk assessment, and that's Ellen. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair. This report advises members and seeks their approval for an updated risk assessment. As highlighted in the report, the Council is committed to ensure, as far as reasonably practicable, the health and safety and well-being of its employees and elected members, as well as a number of third parties, as highlighted in the report. In terms of risk assessments, we normally review these annually, but we can also review them more frequently should a new risk emerge. And in terms of the documentation attached, that incorporates the new operational changes at the Guildhall and also reflects a commentary from one of the members regarding mental health as being a risk to members. Consequently, those risks have been evaluated and there's no additional controls being recommended, and the recommendation in front of members today is that you approve and note the updated risk assessment for the councillor role. Thank you, members.
Ellen, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all. Welcome this. I don't know if anybody was following yesterday's news, main news, when the issue of council risk across the water was highlighted. And it is something I know that local organisations dealing with councillors are looking at as well. Indeed, it is within the councillors' review being undertaken by Maynard Mahoney. So it's appropriate that we have this in front of us. So it should be a regular item and updated as and when a particular risk may occur. We did have a situation a few years back with regard to the lateness of meetings and councillors moving from the Guildhall to car parking, etc. So all of those issues are being taken on board as and when, and that's extremely welcome. Thank you, Alan, for the paper.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that was concerning?
Just to say, just happy to propose the item.
Sure. Alderman Cook, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in, and thanks to the council officers who've worked to create the risk assessment. Just a few wee concerns. So in reference to the annual review of the risk assessment, obviously because I'm a new councillor, because the new one was done there, could I maybe obtain a copy of the previous one? Just for, is that okay? On page 61, the hierarchy of controls, it references to number 5, which is PPE, if I'm reading it correctly. So can we inquire as to whether this is an administrative error or if those meetings within the council or committee meetings should have PPE, and if so, what would that require? I just wasn't sure. Maybe I've read it wrong. And lastly, just for the purpose of clarity as well, in reference to contacting the police, can we ask who would be responsible for this and how the need for such a call would be assessed? Thanks.
Through you, Chair, the references to PPE tend to be in terms of site visits. So as a new councillor, you may look forward to donning your safety boots and gear in terms of any of those planning site visits. So as I say, so that's the context in which PPE is identified, and indeed if members identify any additional needs, we're very happy to actually address those. And your second point was in relation to, sorry, I missed that. Contacting the police in the context of.
So what I just said was, so, you know, just for purpose of clarity, in reference to contacting the police, can we ask who would be responsible for this and how the need for such a call could be assessed?
Well, in terms of our normal health and safety procedures, premises managers are responsible for the safety and management of the building. So if it's in a council premise, then indeed that would be their responsibility. If it's in terms of a personal matter in terms of on an off-site facility, then obviously the member would have to use their own discretion in terms of that context. So all of this is circumstance orientated, but if you feel as a member there are specifics that you want identified within a risk assessment, we can certainly bring that forward. Thank you.
Alderman Morris, go ahead.
Thank you. Can I just ask one? Well, on the first page of that risk assessment, at the bottom of it, it says issue date is the 10th for the 1st, 2013. And I know the date on it is the 30th of January, so just a wee amendment on that. But in regards to the issues that have happened in the chamber before Christmas and the last full council meeting where people entered into the chamber, in light of the fact that we haven't concluded any investigation into that, and you know, and I think that that needs to be an important part where we do the investigation into that of what happened that day, what lessons we can learn from that that day, and I think that the findings of that needs to be included within this risk assessment, because I know from my own point of view, do you know what I mean? I just feel that there was elements of what happened that day that put us at risk. And I just would like clarification and regarding the findings of what that is going to be and how they can be implemented and how we can be safeguarded within this chamber going forward.
Chair, I know this issue has come up a few times, and to restate what I think, just from memory, we discussed back at full council last week. We are going to contact the PSNI firstly with regard to ascertaining if there is some consideration still underway with regard to the matter by PSNI. And with regard to internally within council, there has been an operational meeting with staff to consider arrangements within the building. And I've advised that we will bring that report back as soon as we possibly can, but that it would probably be appropriate to do that in tandem with ascertaining the status of whatever approach PSNI are currently taking with regard to the matter.
John, will that be included, the findings of that, and within the risk assessment, if there's any recommendations through that?
Through you, Chair, I think it's probably most appropriate that we take this one step at a time. We bring that report back, and then if members wish to take forward actions following receipt of that report, then we consider that with you at the time.
Thank you for that, John. Alderman Hussey, you have spoke before, so I would ask you to be quick. And then I've got Councillor Donnelly then afterwards.
Just a quick one for Ellen. Within mental health and well-being, a growing area of concern is of course social media and abuse thereon. Does that fall within the remit of what has been looked at within this particular area item? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, and I think the comment related to the impact of social media in terms of health and well-being of members. that issue hasn't been specifically identified with us, but if members, and indeed I know there's quite a lot of work going on in terms of the NAC and NULGA, if we'll certainly include any controls that we can put in place in terms of any issues that are identified and recommendations that are brought forward. So we're happy to keep this under continuous review as more information becomes available.
Appreciate that, Chair. Thanks, Colin.
Councillor Donnelly.
Carmel, Chair, just to go back to some of the issues that Alderman McMorris has raised there, is council officers, look, I get the distinct impression there's a bit of gaslighting going on, but is there any staff members that have made complaints regarding what happened on, or are any of these complaints the subject of a PSNI investigation? Do council officers have that information?
Through you, Chair, the Director of Business and Culture isn't at the meeting, Councillor Donnelly, but I'm not aware of any complaints having been made by council officers. Full stop, yeah.
Thanks for that, Chair, because I do get the distinct impression that certain elected reps are trying to create that conditions from conversations in this chamber and conversations that they've had with members of staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Harkin.
Along the same line, Chair, that we have as a council not voted to do anything proactively, and I would support any kind of call on the PSNI to be investigating people and stuff like that. I think that much of this has been blown up in the sense of, we talked about the political issues at the time. So, but yeah, even for, we didn't vote to do anything. If the PSNI decide of their own volition to do something, that's got nothing to do with the council in terms of its corporate position. If individual members pursue something, that is not a council action at this point. And it just seems like, look, there was a few young people in here wearing COVID masks. There was a banner behind the podium. People were here and passionate about the issue because the world is watching a genocide happening, and I think that for people to be more concerned about those issues than what's actually happening in Gaza is concerning.
Thank you, Councillor Alderman McMorris. I would ask you to be brief just because you've already spoken, and also if we can try and keep it on the subject of the risk register, which is the item that we're discussing, I would be grateful. Go ahead.
This is going to be quick. In regards to the comments just made, I would like to put on record that I have actually spoke to the police and I have actually put a complaint into the police in order to investigate the goings on. And I think that this council has to recognise that there was issues that went on that day that should be included within the risk assessment. Somebody in this building allowed people to come in through doors which they need a pass for. I think that there's questions need to be asked. And I think it has to form part of this risk assessment that if people are allowed to enter into this chamber to put everybody at risk, they were within touching distance of all of the officers at the top table. And I think that there is a lot of questions to be asked. And I think that the council has a duty under the health and safety of all of its employees and us as elected representatives. And I think that there is questions to be asked, and I just want to put that on record.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to just try and get things clear because I listened to this conversation last week, and I think either I'm confused or there's some other people confused, but I'm definitely not on the same lines as everybody else. So I want to ask a question. The PSNI will do what the PSNI are doing, and that's up to them. And the council, in my opinion, as a corporate body, should not interfere with that and let them do whatever they're doing. Can I ask, have council initiated or been asked to initiate their own internal investigation into what happened in the council chamber over recent council meetings? because I think people are of the belief that there is an investigation, an internal investigation going on. And if there is, I certainly wasn't asked to support or vote or even consider that investigation. But I think people are mixing up the PSNI investigation with the council investigation. And I think going forward, it would be helpful in this conversation if that was clear. So my question to the Chief Executive is there an ongoing internal investigation being carried out by council into recent events in the council chamber? Thank you.
So, Chair, I've tried to be as clear as I possibly can, both in the full council meeting and in this meeting earlier, and apologies if that hasn't been clear. We were asked as council officers to ascertain the status of whatever considerations are currently, and I'm using that word considerations because we don't know what the PSNI are doing. We've been asked to contact the PSNI with regard to the status of whatever they may or may not be doing. Quite separately to that, we have held, the Director of Business and Culture has held meetings with staff to consider operational arrangements within this building in light of issues that have happened with regard to that meeting. But there are no investigations being undertaken. There have been meetings held with council officers to ascertain what may or may not be better practice in the future. And that report is the report that I will be bringing back to probably Governance and Strategic Planning Committee in due course, together with whatever PSNI advise us in terms of the status of what they are undertaking. Once that report is brought in, members are then may take a view on it and decide where we go from there. That's as clear as I can be, and I think is consistent with what I said earlier, and is consistent with what I said at full council last week. If members wish something else to take place, we need direction as officers with respect to that.
Thank you for that, John. I have two councillors indicated online, Councillor Danley and Councillor Gallagher, and then I will be bringing this item to a close if that's okay, but I do need a seconder for the recommendation.
Chair, I appreciate you letting me back in here, but there was a comment made there by, and I'm nearly sure my connection here is not the best, but did Alderman McMorris make a suggestion that somebody in this building, that building there, allowed them in? Because if that is correct, then she's just made a very serious allegation. You know, she's talking about investigations, but her mind is made up. And can we have a legal opinion on what was said there? Because she's just put cast a cloud of doubt or an accusation over every member of staff and elected representative. Thank you.
Just for clarity, I asked how they get in. I have no knowledge about how they get in. That's what I'm looking to ascertain, is how they were able to get in. You know, that's what I've said. I have no allegations to make about anybody. I have no idea how they get in. And that's why, and I've repeatedly asked in this chamber for that to be investigated and looked into and a report brought back to yourselves on that matter. I make no ambiguity about that. I don't know how they get in, and that's what I want to know.
I think that clarifies that there's no allegation as such, so I feel that there's a need for a legal opinion on it. Councillor Gallagher, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Mine was on the same vein of
Not the mayor.
Chair. Sorry, Chair. Mine was the same vein of thought. It was when the comment was says that someone let someone in or let those people in. It was like a firm accusation that maybe the alderman has more information than the rest of us does, or is she just accusing staff just off the cuff, which I don't think should be made. Thank you, Chair.
Can I reiterate? I'm not accusing
I
anybody.
think that Alderman McMorris has made it clear that she wasn't making allegations, she was asking for clarity, so we're going to close that off if you could, please. Councillor Mooney, and then I'm going to have to bring this item to a close, please, folks.
Chair, I don't want to drag this conversation on any longer than it probably has already, but it was just a matter of note that I was interested in was obviously Alderman McMorris did say that she's made a statement of complaint to police, and obviously that's laid before the police anyway, and there's a duty to investigate on the behalf. Have the police been in contact with council in any as arising out of that statement of complaint? Because obviously, you know, in any criminal investigation, there's evidential matters that have to be attended to, but can John or Philip confirm that the police have been in contact with council, and has any discussions taken place between police on the basis of Alderman McMorris's complaint? Just to clarify, I am correct in assuming that Alderman McMorris did say that she had made a statement that you made a complaint, Emily. Thank you, John.
Yes, I I can clarify that PSNI have been in touch with council with regard to the incident back relatively soon after the incident occurred. I can't clarify on what basis they've been in touch with us, whether it was in the back of a complaint or what it was in the back of. Just simply can't recall, frankly. But they have been in touch with us and they've requested information, which if we can provide, we have provided.
Just a supplementary, obviously the bearing of the investigation would probably reflect what was said and what was mentioned in the complaint by Alderman McMorris. Obviously we haven't cited that complaint, but it's just something I would be interested in. You know, if there's any contact by police in relation to this matter, I suppose would be subject to being prejudicial to an investigation, might be of bearing if the committee was, you know, informed of any matters about that anyway. Is that okay, John?
Through you, Chair, again,
Chair,
say that I've said on numerous occasions, we're happy to contact PSNI to ask them for information on what considerations they currently have. I don't know what they are. They will undoubtedly provide us with some sort of statement, and we will relay that back to you when we know it.
Thank you for that, John. At this stage, I have Councillor Heaney has proposed the recommendation in the report. Councillor Boggs has just seconded, and further reports will be brought back in relation to that specific incident. I am going to suggest a 5-minute recess, just given the time, and that I have to go, and Councillor Farrell is going to take over for the conclusion of the meeting. So we'll take 5 minutes and let Councillor Farrell come up. Thank you, folks.
is item 11, and it's the appointment of councillors to the Port and Harbour Commissioners. So we've got Ellen to take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks council nominees to be considered by the Permanent Secretary for the Department for Infrastructure for appointment to the Board of Londonderry Port and Harbour Commissioners. As set out in the background, we've received correspondence regarding this matter from the Public Appointments Unit of the department, seeking to take forward appointments which will last up to a maximum of 4 years. As indicated in the report, there is a proposition going forward that there are 2 vacancies, and that's subject to a current councillor's views in terms of extending their current term. So the report itself indicates that in order to go through with this process, the Permanent Secretary would like a choice of nominees as required by the Commissioner for Public Appointments from which to choose the councillor reps, and they have considered that they would probably like to see at least 6 councillors nominated to be part of that pool. They've indicated within their documentation that there is an interview process, and the closing date for applications is March 22nd. So it's not that long away. The recommendations in front of members today is that members nominate, as per the correspondence, a minimum of 6 elected members to participate in the appointment process to the Board of Londonderry Port and Harbour Commissioners. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Ellen. So my only indicated speaker thus far is Councillor Duffy. Sandra?
And I'm just going to suggest that Sinn Féin nominated full council. Thank you for the report, Ellen.
So we've got Alderman Kerrigan in the chat box.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in. Chair, I was just seeking clarification on this process when it occurred 4 years ago, I suppose. And as from what I recall, I think it was effectively left that it was open to members to apply. I know it was recommended at least, this recommendation in this paper is for at least 6, but I thought it was effectively left for party groups or independents or whatever, whoever wished to put their nomination forward, because an interview process will be followed, and again the decision will be outside of our hands. So I think that was the case, but just to get clarification on that, and if that was the case, I don't see any reason why it couldn't be the same this time round. But just for clarification, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for that, Alderman Kerrigan. That's my understanding of the process the last time, that we allowed any member who was interested to submit an application, and then they were interviewed by DFI. But Councillor Tierney?
Not Chair, just to note that was my memory as well of the process last time, and I think in 2014 it was the same. So I don't see any reason why we would not follow the process that we have previously followed. I'm pretty confident that you'll have a minimum of 6 anyway. So I think it should be just left open to the members. The references is there on how you apply. It should be left open to members if they wish to apply or not. But possibly maybe it might be for those that aren't on this committee, it might be better that communication comes out from council to make them aware of the open call and see what happens from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. I'm just looking at the actual recommendation. So, Sandra, have you proposed that, or do we need to amend it, or what's the cleanest way to actually do this? Because like the system we had 4 years ago worked well. It didn't prevent anybody from applying, but that's not the recommendation in here either.
Through you, Chair, and I mean, members are absolutely correct. This report reflects the process that the department actually sees working forward and engaging with council in the process as such. But members did the last time decide that rather than nominate, because it's not required to be nominated on the basis of the hunt, that members were open themselves to making a number of applications. And as I say, I think the main issue for the department is that they get sufficient numbers going forward to facilitate the recruitment process itself. I do not even recall from the last time that we knew how many people or who went forward, but we were obviously notified of the results. In terms of the recommendations in front of members today, if members are happy, and again, as I say, that if someone wishes to propose that we go forward on an open call approach, certainly we can change that at this stage. Thank you.
Thanks for that clarity, Ellen. So I think Councillor Duffy has proposed and you're happy with that?
I didn't make any proposal. I just said that we would nominate it full council. So I am more than happy to go with others' recommendations.
So, Councillor Kearney.
If Sandra's not proposing it, I'm happy to propose that it goes as an open call, but with communication to all members from council with the details of how they apply and the closing date and stuff. But other than that, I'm happy enough.
Right, so Councillor Mooney has seconded that proposal. I've got Alderman Hussey in the chat box. Derek?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to confirm, the last two occasions are exactly the way it was done. It was up to individual councillors to apply, and they applied directly to the department and were subsequently interviewed. So the proposal that is left as an open call, I fully support. And indeed, I would suggest that whilst we would endorse an open call, that any councillor from Derry City and Strabane District Council putting their name forward has the endorsement of council in their application. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Derek. Councillor Hagan?
Yeah, it was just a question about the funding. So, because I read there that it's almost £10,000 per year for anybody that is on the board, and I would assume that that would be councillors. Is that fully funded by the department? Because 24 days work for £10,000, I think any public sector worker would be looking at that thinking that's a pretty good deal.
So I will ask the Chief Executive to clarify, but I'm pretty sure we're not paying it. Right, so Chief Executive is saying that it's funded by the Department for Infrastructure or possibly the port, but not us, not us. Okay, right, so we have no dissent and I think everybody's happy with that approach. So the next item is item 12, which is the maternity policy and guidance, and we've got Paula to take us through that item.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek members' approval on a maternity policy and guidance, which has been developed and attached in Appendix 1. The Council recognises the importance of providing a flexible and supportive working environment for pregnant employees and new parents, as well as ensuring compliance with all our legal obligations. So we have consulted and worked with our recognised trade unions to develop this maternity policy and guidance, and it outlines the support available to all Council employees. It's intended that the policy and guidance will be reviewed regularly and, if necessary, revised in light of any change in legislation or best practice. It's recommended that members approve the maternity policy and guidance as attached. Thank you. Opposed?
Okay, we've got Councillor Duffy in the chamber proposing it, but we've got Alderman Kerrigan in the chat box who's indicated they wish to speak. So, Keith?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies. Chair, just one wee simple question. And again, I'm not a member of the committee, and thank you for letting me in. Is this, Paula, is this only applicable to council staff? I'm just asking, is there any equivalent policy, or does this policy include elected representatives, councillors who are effectively still paid through the council?
The policy is specifically for council employees. However, in terms of statutory maternity pay, etc., that would depend on councillors' earnings, etc. But no, the policy applies specifically to employees.
Chair, just as a brief follow-up, Chair, who then is responsible for the like of maternity pay towards elected representatives and the benefits which are, I'm not begrudging any benefits to any members of staff and any department on the council of almost, I think it's almost 1,000 staff members, but who then is meant to cover this or have such a policy for the elected representatives whenever we're still given our allowance from Derry City and Esteban as the council?
I'm not sure, maybe Ellen, can you come in on that? In terms of employees and an entitlement to the statutory maternity pay, etc., that depends on their earnings. So I'm not sure in terms of elected members, in terms of the allowance they get from council, if that entitles them to statutory maternity pay, but I can get that clarified.
Through you, Chair. This particular issue has been highlighted recently as a gap. Off the top of my head now, I'm not 100% on who the body is that's taken forward to lead on this. So we'll update members at full council if you're happy. Thank you.
So thanks for those updates, Ellen and Paula. We've got Alderman Cook who'd like to speak. Chelsea.
Just a wee quick one. You know, I read through it or whatever. What's the policy for someone that, like an employee that wouldn't take any maternity leave?
So an employee who there's specific legislation and specific measures that, you know, there's a requirement, there's an actual legal requirement for an employee to be off for a certain period of time. It's a very short protected period of time. I have to say I haven't actually, you know, I've never come across that. Most people obviously want to take their maternity leave, but there is a protected period in law that you must be absent from work.
Could I just maybe could you find out and let me know, just for curiosity? Is that okay?
No problem. Thanks.
And the final indicated speaker on this item is Alderman Hussey. Derek.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Paula. I notice it's called maternity policy. Does it embrace a paternity policy as well? Thank you.
Okay, there are paternity rights, and also there's a number of other flexible and rights that we're now incorporating in another policy, but this one is very focused on the maternity. But we are, you know, we have guidelines that we're trying to formulate in a policy on a number of other issues such as that.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Derek. So that's item 12, no dissent. So proposed, have we got a proposer? Councillor Duffy, seconded, Councillor Boggs. The next 7 items are open for information. Would anybody like to raise or discuss any of them? Councillor Heaney, which one?
Item 19. It's just take the opportunity. It's my understanding that a letter we had sent to the Shared Island Unit to invite them in for a deputation has yet to be responded to. If that's still the case, I would propose that we write again to encourage them to come up. So I'm just want to make that proposal.
Open.
Any other items and open for information? So,
Chair.
Yeah.
Chair, I've just 2 things briefly on items 13 and 14. Just in regards to item 13, and as a paper there in regards to the Housing Council, and I have replaced Alderman Breslin on it, and it would just be, it is interesting, I will be fair. I suppose there may be more of a preference for in-person meetings, but I am happy if any members, my mobile number and my email address is readily available. If any members have an issue which you feel it may be of benefit to be raised on the Housing Council, I'm more than content to raise that issue on behalf of any of the members. So I just wanted to state that in regards to item 13. And I can speak on 14 now if you wish.
That's fine.
Yeah, item 14, just a point of clarification. I do see their request in the meeting in regards to loyal orders. I'm just wondering, or maybe an officer can get in touch in regards to who they've contacted. I do see it has mention of the Apprentice Boys, and I know the main Apprentice Boys organisation is based within the city. And in regards to the county, the city of Londonderry Grand Orange Lodge, and in regards, it says the Royal Black Preceptory. It doesn't mention which district or county or anything else, but it's just the makeup of our city and district. We do take in quite the large proportion of our city and district is within County Tyrone, and there are organisations in County Tyrone of those various institutions and organisations. So that's just to get clarification who they've contacted, and maybe a wee bit of clarification as to the main purposes in doing that, because there are demonstrations of different ilk held within the West Tyrone element of our council area as well. So just if you want to meet the ones in the city, that's grand. Maybe we don't want to deal with the ones in the lower end. That's up to yourselves, but just to get clarification on it. Thank you, Chair.
Ellen, could you provide a response to
through you, Chair? I mean, the correspondence has gone out to the Secretary of the Apprentice Boys of Derry, the Grand Orange Lodge, and to the Royal Black Preceptory, on the basis that they are and again, if I'm completely wrong, I apologise in advance, as being the three loyal orders, and obviously, as I say, to reflect the resolution that was passed by council. Now, I am conscious that there are districts, but we clearly we're conscious of getting the primary organisations involved there. So those are the three secretaries that we've written to at this stage. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Tierney.
Yep, Chair, thank you. I attended the last meeting with the loyal orders that was organised through this council, which I found to be extremely useful, to be honest. I notice in the report it says that this was agreed in September of last year. There's no date on it when the correspondence was sent, but I assume it was sent shortly after that. We're now in February, and I have no doubt when you look at the size of some of the parades across the city and district that those organisations are, if they're not already, they're probably very quickly heading into the planning of those parades. And I think it would be useful that a delegation from council met with them and kept this ongoing. So I think that letter should be resent to those organisations, informing them that council are keen to meet and discuss and support where we can those organisations in their preparations for parading this coming summer. So I think I would suggest, which the recommendation is to note the content of the report, I would propose that we resend that invitation to a meeting and ask for it to take place as soon as possible, Chair. And that's a proposal.
Okay, so proposed by Councillor Tierney, seconded by Councillor Mooney. Councillor Jackson.
Chair, I was actually very surprised to see this paper, and there's not a lot of detail contained within it. But if there's a proposal there that we visit, whether it's Apprentice Boys or any of the loyal orders, they work through issues surrounding parading. We've no issue supporting that. But I do think that it's worth pointing out that since we've done the meeting, and the Apprentice Boys in particular have been engaging with council through SAG, and that is a massive step in terms of anybody that's organising major events within our city and district. they'd be engaging in the process, they'd be working with council and the statutory partners to address issues is the right approach. From our perspective, we are encouraged that the event organisers are taking steps, working with the relevant partners. They ensure that these events are run off safely, and that any concerns that we may have are addressed at the planning stage. I know that those meetings, that engagement is happening. Meeting with political representatives is important in one sense, and it's useful for us. But in relation to making the relevant changes and making adequate preparation, the most appropriate space there is through SAG, and I'm really encouraged that that's begun to take place. So if there's a proposal and people wish to engage, 100%, there's no issue with it. But I think it is worth pointing out that event organisers, by engaging with the statutory partners through SAG, is a major step in the right direction. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that, Christopher. Alderman McMorris.
Thank you. And basically that just leads me on to what I was going to say. Obviously, I'm not a part of the organisation, or nor have I spoke to the organisation, but I am aware that there's much work that goes on behind the scenes in regard to the parading within the city. I'm on the CCI board, and I know Jim is part of that, along with business owners. And as Christopher rightly said, they are engaging with SAG, and parading in the city isn't a remit of council. It basically sits within the parading commission. So, and I just think, they're already engaging. There's positive steps and positive action in regards to that, and I would just be kind of concerned about the fact that if elected representatives feel as if, they should bring them in and somehow be accountable, or basically ask them what their plans or whatever is, it could be counterproductive. I think that there's already processes in place which is working very well, and I have a feeling that we should let that kind of evolve. Thank you.
Councillor Tierney, and again, but can we be really clear? What is the proposal? Because it's open for information, and it's telling us that correspondence has been forwarded. So are we saying that we write another letter? Is that, yeah, so we do it again? So there was no response the previous time? Or? It's only provide a bit of clarity for me, because I'm not 100% on this. And if somebody can provide a bit of clarity, and then I'm going to bring in Alderman Gay.
Chair, I mean, we're simply happy to, we're in contact with those with whom we have written the letters. It was just an update to say the letters have gone. I think if members are minded today, we just continue with that contact.
Through you, Chair, I think it's important, and I fully appreciate that the loyal orders are engaging with SAG, and I think that's the right approach. But I also think it would do no harm in relation to the lead up to major parades across the city and district that they were also engaging with elected representatives. The reason for that is that, and hopefully things don't go wrong, but when things do go wrong, residents across the city and district don't contact SAG to find out or to complain about what's going on. And I think it's a good relationship builder between elected reps and the loyal orders, and anyone else, not just the loyal orders, anyone else who is holding large scale events across this district. I attended the meeting previously. I found it quite useful. It's my opinion that the loyal orders who were in attendance found it useful, and I don't see why we wouldn't be doing that. I think it's important that whenever there are large-scale events, such as parades right around our city centre, in particular, that local elected reps are informed, have had discussions, and are able to relay the information to local residents who, in my opinion, and it's only my opinion, which I have shared with the loyal orders for a long, long time, they aren't informed, in my view, in the correct manner. And I think it's important that engagement is kept up between local residents, elected representatives, and the loyal orders for that simple reason.
Alderman Guy.
Thanks, Chair. I'm a member of this committee, but I'll declare an interest to start off with as a member of the Apprentice Boys. I think this here item here is basically whatever I'm saying. It's only a couple of weeks old since the emails have been sent out to the secretaries of both the Apprentice Boys, the Grand Lodge, and the Black Preceptory. So probably still waiting. I know for a fact that the Grand Lodge had only a meeting on Saturday. So correspondence probably is just being put together now to come back to council. And I do agree that there is a lot of members that have heard about the involvement of SAG, and it's not fully implemented yet, but and the fact that there is the parade, especially in August now, has become that big. I think it's a 1-1 for both parties, that basically if the SAGs are involved in this and basically they use their expertise and holding major events in the city. I think the Apprentice Boys have a great marshalling team, locally marshalling team, well conducted by themselves. And I think that they can only, both council and the Apprentice Boys can only learn from each other and moving forward and making a safer event for everybody. As it is, there is some, obviously, there's issues with it, as there is all major, events in the city, but we're working to sort those issues out and move forward, so to make it an enjoyable family event. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so is everybody happy? Just a very, very brief point. I just want to be clear, there's major issues in relation to parading. There's structures that have been set up to address those concerns. I know personally, as a councillor in the Waterside, that's massively impacted by some of the parades. I am engaging with the PSNI, with the Parades Commission, and in some occasions with the event organisers. They try and ensure that those issues don't reoccur in future parades. But the importance of getting parades right is it's massive. We've demonstrated in the past how Derry can show the way, and this is a major step that the parade organisers are working with the statutory partners. If we've got issues, we've got opportunities through SAG where politics is taken out of it, and responsible and appropriate measures can be put in place to ensure that the events can go off as safely as possible and those issues don't reoccur. There's always going to be, and it's rightfully so, if there's issues that reoccur, they'll be raised at this council. They'll be raised within the chamber. They'll be raised with individual meetings with the PSNI or the Parades Commission, or again the event organisers. But for us to continually request meetings, I don't know. We don't do it with every major event organiser, and I feel that it's really, really encouraging the fact that the Apprentice Boys in particular have
have accepted that there's issues, have accepted that there's support there in the form of SAG, and they're working through that process. Let's take the politics out of it, and try and work through and find a resolution. And this is one of the ways that we can do it. So it's a major step. We're heading in the right direction, and I don't feel that it's best for particularly the people of the waterside that are massively impacted by parading. It's not in their interest for us to kick up a storm within this chamber around parading. Thanks, Chair. Okay. So
Yeah, just to point out, there's nobody kicking up a storm around parading. It was simply to resend the invitation. If anybody's kicking up a storm, it's those that are not supporting the proposal. They send the invitation. It's quite simple. It's already been agreed by council. Very, very simple. There's nobody kicking up a storm about it.
Okay. So Paula, Alderman Kerrigan has a declaration of interest, so if that could be recorded. So there's only one other person's mentioned and that they want to raise an item, and that's Alderman Hussey on item 17.
Thank you, Chair. The officer recommendation on that is that, subject to members' comments, that the correspondence is noted. Rather than that, I am proposing correspondence from the Cabinet Office re His Majesty the King's Portrait Scheme be deferred to full council.
Can I ask why?
What I was going to say is there's no decision on this. You wouldn't really defer something if we don't need to make a decision, but I'm sure you're able to raise it at full council. But Councillor Tierney's asking why. Would you share that with us, Derek?
To discuss the matter further at full council, rather than just note it here, there are considerations in the background that people are investigating re this. So I think it deserves the space for that to happen, and then proper discussion at full council on a response to the correspondence. Thank you.
Yeah. So would anybody like to comment or no? Right, that's fine. Well, you'll be able to discuss that at full council, Alderman Hussey, as you can with any item. So that is open for information finished, I hope. Can I get a proposer to move on to confidential? Alderman Cook, Councillor Mooney,